It is January 31st, 1939. A Nazi seaplane is flying over the most remote continent on Earth. Pilot Richard Heinrich Schirmacher has been staring at white ice for hours. Nothing moves. Nothing changes. There is only the roar of the engine and the endless frozen nothing beneath him. Then, the color of the ground changes. He banks left. He drops altitude. He looks again. Brown earth. Rocky, dry, completely snow-free ground. And then the lakes, liquid, open, blue in the middle of Antarctica. He circles, he photographs, he radios the ship. And the Third Reich quietly marks it on a classified map they never planned to share with the world. 8 years later, the United States responds by sending 4,700 soldiers, 13 warships, and a fully armed aircraft carrier to the exact same location on the planet. They call it a training exercise. Nobody believes that. Here is the question that nobody, not the US government, not the German archives, not 60 years of declassified documents, has ever cleanly answered. What were they actually looking for down there? Before we go any further, I want to know where you are watching this from right now. Drop your city, your country, in the comments below. I read every single one. Today's like goal is just 50 likes. That is it, 50. If we cross that number, that is your support pushing this channel forward. If we have not crossed it yet when you are watching this, this is your moment. If you are new here and you like mysteries that actually happened, hit subscribe. We go deep on this channel. Now, let's go back to where this all began. December 17th, 1938, Hamburg, Germany. A ship called the MS Schwabenland prepares to depart. On paper, on the official manifest, it is a whaling survey mission. Germany imports whale oil from Norway for margarine production and soap. The Nazi government wants to end that dependency. They need their own whaling base in the Southern Ocean. That is the story they file. That is what goes in the public record. But look at the cargo more carefully. 2 military-grade Dornier Wall seaplanes are loaded onto the deck. Not commercial aircraft. Not fishing vessels. Military reconnaissance aircraft, capable of long-range aerial photography. They are named Passat and Boreas. The ship also carries an unusual amount of photographic equipment. Film stock, mapping instruments, drop canisters, and the crew, led by Captain Alfred Richer, a career naval officer, has been briefed on a secondary mission that does not appear on any public document. The Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, wants potential naval positioning points identified in the waters approaching Antarctica. Remote locations where submarines could resupply, where commerce raiders could hide. The Allied powers are watching every major port in the world by late 1938. They are not watching Antarctica. Nobody is watching Antarctica. The ship crosses the Atlantic, passes through the Southern Ocean, and enters the pack ice on January 19, 1939. The Norwegian government has formally claimed this territory. They call it Queen Maud Land. In international law, it is Norwegian sovereign territory. Germany does not care. Over the next 30 days, the Passat and Boreas fly 15 separate mapping missions. They cover approximately 600,000 square kilometers of the Antarctic coastline and interior. They take 16,000 aerial photographs. And at regular intervals throughout the flight missions, they drop metal darts from the aircraft. Each dart is stamped with a swastika. Each one is a territorial claim marker designed to penetrate the ice and stake Germany's ownership of the land below. They renamed the entire territory Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. The expedition returns to Hamburg on February 6, 1939. Germany's invasion of Poland begins 6 months later. The photographs disappear into classified archives. The maps disappear. The mission is quietly buried by the war. For decades, almost nobody talks about it. Almost, but that was not the strangest part of what Schirmacher saw on January 31st. It is January 31st, 1939. Late in the afternoon, pilot Richard Heinrich Schirmacher is on a routine mapping flight over the Antarctic interior. His mission is straightforward: photograph as much terrain as possible before the light fails. He has been flying over ice for hours. The same white, the same nothing, the same frozen silence beneath him. Then the instruments stay steady, the engine stays steady, and the ground changes color. He banks the aircraft left. He drops 400 feet of altitude. He leans toward the window. Brown ground. Rocky outcroppings breaking through the surface. Patches of soil and stone with no ice covering them. None. In the middle of a continent that is 98% permanent ice sheet. He keeps flying, and then the lakes appear, liquid water, blue and clear and completely unfrozen. Multiple lakes, scattered across a stretch of terrain approximately 35 kilometers wide. The outside temperature is well below 0 degrees Celsius. Those lakes should be solid ice. They are not. Schirmacher photographs everything he can before the light changes. He marks the location precisely. He files his report with Captain Richer. The anomaly is real. It is documented. It makes it into the expedition records, and it is eventually named after the man who found it. Today, it is called the Schirmacher Oasis. It is a verified geological feature, not a theory, not a legend. Currently housing an active Russian research station called Novolazarevskaya and an Indian research station called Maitri. Scientists who have studied it explain the phenomenon through geothermal activity. Heat rising from volcanic or tectonic processes deep below the surface keeps a contained zone of rock and soil warm enough to prevent permanent ice cover. The lakes remain liquid because the ground beneath them stays warm enough to counteract the Antarctic cold above. Geothermal heat rising from somewhere deep beneath the rock in Antarctica, keeping the ground bare, keeping the water liquid, creating, in the words of more than one researcher who has worked there, a landscape that simply should not exist where it does. Now here is where the story splits. Track 1 is the verified science. The Schirmacher Oasis is a natural anomaly, extraordinary but explainable. Geothermal activity is not rare on Earth. Cold climates with geothermal heat create unusual microclimates. Iceland is built on this principle. New Zealand, parts of Siberia. Track 2 is the question that every serious investigator has to at least ask before dismissing it. If you discovered a geothermally heated patch of bare ground in the most inaccessible and unsurveilled location on the planet, in the middle of a world war, what would you consider doing with it? And if the answer to that question made you uncomfortable enough, what would you do next? What they did next took 6 years, and it involved submarines. Pause for 1 second. I want to know what you think. Natural geological phenomenon, or something that needed a military response? Drop it in the comments right now. Let's see what the records actually say. May 8, 1945. Germany surrenders unconditionally. The war in Europe is over. Every German military unit, on land and sea, receives immediate orders to cease all operations and present themselves for Allied processing. Every unit complies. Every unit but 2. On July 10, 1945, 63 days after the German surrender, the Argentine Coast Guard receives a distress signal. A vessel is requesting permission to enter the port of Mar del Plata. It is a German submarine designated U-530. Commander Otto Wehrmuth. The crew is in poor physical condition. Their voyage has clearly been long. When Argentine naval officers board the vessel, they make several immediate discoveries. All personal identification documents have been destroyed. Every sailor's papers gone. The submarine's logbook has significant gaps. Entries are missing for extended periods. When Commander Wehrmuth is questioned about why he did not surrender in May with every other German naval vessel, his answer is simple and deeply unsatisfying. He says they were on a long patrol. He does not specify where that patrol went. Argentine intelligence passes the information to American and British intelligence. An investigation begins. The crew is eventually repatriated. The investigation produces no conclusive findings about the submarine's movements between May and July of 1945. 6 weeks later, on August 17, 1945, U-977 surfaces in the same port, same city, same conditions, documents destroyed, crew silent. Commander Heinz Schaefer is more willing to talk than Wehrmuth. He later publishes a memoir about the voyage, a book titled U-977, released in 1952. In it, he describes spending 66 consecutive days submerged beneath the South Atlantic Ocean, surfacing only at night in remote open water, deliberately avoiding any Allied patrol routes. He explains this as an attempt to avoid capture and reach a neutral country. He does not explain what the submarine was doing in the Southern Ocean during those 66 days. He does not explain why a vessel trying to reach Argentina, a country directly across the Atlantic from Europe, would need to spend over 2 months submerged in the South Atlantic. The shortest route from Germany to Argentina does not require 66 days underwater. It does not require avoiding the South Atlantic in that way. Unless the route was not the shortest route, unless there was somewhere else to go first. British naval intelligence files an internal report in late 1945 speculating that the two submarines may have been engaged in transporting personnel or materials to a remote location prior to their arrival in Argentina. The report names no location specifically. Newspaper reports in Argentina, Brazil, and the United States run wild. Headlines claim Hitler himself was aboard one of the submarines, that Nazi scientists and their technology had been evacuated to a secret base. Allied intelligence dismisses most of these claims publicly, but they do not close the investigation. They pass it upward, and within 1 year, the United States military is preparing a response, one of the largest peacetime expeditions to Antarctica in the history of the program. The response is called Operation Highjump, and calling it a training exercise is like calling the D-Day invasion a beach holiday. August 26, 1946, 1 year and 18 days after Germany surrendered, the United States Navy launches Operation Highjump. The fleet assembles, 13 ships in total. Among them, the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, capable of launching and recovering multiple aircraft simultaneously. A submarine, the USS Senate, for underwater operations. 2 icebreaker vessels, 2 destroyer escorts, a fleet oiler, a seaplane tender, and a flagship, the USS Mount Olympus, from which Rear Admiral Richard Byrd commands the entire operation. 4,700 men, more personnel than some Allied operations in the Second World War. The official mission statement, released to the press, describes Operation Highjump as a training exercise, testing cold weather military equipment, mapping the Antarctic coastline, scientific research. Let us think about that for one moment. The Second World War ends in September 1945. The United States has just demobilized millions of soldiers and sailors. The defense budget is under enormous political pressure to shrink. Rationing is still active in parts of the country. Veterans are coming home to a nation trying to return to peacetime. And in that climate, 8 months after the war ends, the U.S. Navy allocates an aircraft carrier, a submarine, 11 support vessels, and nearly 5,000 personnel to map a frozen continent that no country has ever used for anything militarily significant. For training, the operation is planned to last 6 to 8 months. It is pulled out after 8 weeks. No public statement explains the early withdrawal. Admiral Byrd gives a press conference in Santiago, Chile, on his way home. The Chilean newspaper El Mercurio publishes an interview with him on March 5, 1947. In it, Byrd warns that the United States must prepare for the possibility of being attacked by aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole at speeds that current technology cannot intercept. This is 1947. The Soviet Union does not yet have a nuclear weapon. The Cold War is barely beginning. No nation on Earth has publicly demonstrated aircraft capable of intercontinental polar flight at the speeds Byrd describes. So who exactly is Byrd warning about? The declassified operational records of Highjump, released progressively through the 1970s through the 1990s, confirm that the fleet conducted extensive photographic and sonar mapping of the Queen Maudland coastline, the same coastline the Germans photographed in 1938 and 1939. The records show multiple flight missions conducted deep into the Antarctic interior, beyond what any mapping exercise would require for the coastline alone. What those interior missions found is either not recorded in the declassified materials, or the relevant portions remain classified. The gap in the record is not a conspiracy theory. It is a gap in the record, and in history, gaps in records are either an accident of time or a decision. What comes next is the most uncomfortable part. Not a theory. A documented statement from one of the most senior German naval officers who ever lived. Stay with me, because the final account, the one that connects the 1938 expedition, the 1945 submarines, and the 1946 military response into a single line, was only partially declassified decades after the events themselves. If you have made it this far, thank you genuinely. Hit the like button right now if this story has you thinking. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz commanded the entire German U-boat fleet during the Second World War. He was, by every military and historical measure, one of the most capable and dangerous naval commanders of the 20th century. His submarines sank more Allied tonnage than any other Axis force. His operational understanding of the South Atlantic The shipping lanes, the patrol routes, the resupply possibilities, was deeper than almost any other officer alive. After Hitler's death on April 30th, 1945, Dönitz served as head of the German state for 11 days before surrendering to the Allies. He was tried at Nuremberg, convicted of war crimes, sentenced to 10 years. During the years surrounding his trial, a statement attributed to Dönitz circulated through intelligence and journalistic channels. In various forms, the statement describes him boasting of constructing an impregnable fortress, a sanctuary hidden beneath eternal ice. Now here is the honest, documented truth. Historians who have reviewed the full Nuremberg transcripts have found no version of this exact statement in the official record. The quote as it circulates online is almost certainly distorted, exaggerated, possibly fabricated entirely in its most dramatic forms. What the German naval archives do confirm is the existence of Operation Schatzgräber, a real classified Kriegsmarine program to establish a permanent weather station in the Arctic. Not the Antarctic, the Arctic, different pole, different hemisphere. That operation was disastrous. The men barely survived the conditions. It was quietly abandoned. Cambridge University oceanographer Colin Summerhays published a peer-reviewed academic paper in 2007, drawing on declassified German naval archives to comprehensively examine the question of whether a permanent Nazi base was ever established in Antarctica. His conclusion is firm. No base was ever built. The 1938 expedition was too short, the equipment was wrong, and the war disrupted everything before any infrastructure could be established. Base 211, as the mythology calls it, is almost certainly a fiction constructed decades after the war from fragments of rumor and deliberate misdirection. Almost certainly, because here is what Summerhays' paper and the German Naval Archives and the declassified American operation records cannot answer together. They cannot explain three things that are all independently verified and documented facts. Fact 1. In 1938, the German Navy sent a classified expedition to Queen Maud Land with a secondary mission of identifying potential naval positioning points. They photographed 16,000 images, dropped territorial markers, and discovered a geothermally active oasis of liquid lakes and ice-free terrain that has no equivalent anywhere else on the continent. Fact 2. In the summer of 1945, 2 German submarines arrived in Argentina months after the German surrender, with destroyed documents, unexplained patrol routes, and 66 days of unaccounted movement in the South Atlantic, a region that lies between Europe and the Schirmacher Oasis. Fact 3. In 1946, the United States Navy deployed one of the largest armed expeditions in Antarctic history to the same geographic region, pulled it out early, without explanation, and its commanding admiral publicly warned about the threat of aircraft attacking America from polar directions at speeds no known aircraft could yet reach. 3 facts, 3 separate events, 3 separate governments involved, spanning 8 years. None of them, individually, proves anything. All of them, together, describe a pattern that nobody has ever fully explained away. The archives show German intention in 1938. The submarines suggest activity in 1945. The American response confirms that someone at the highest levels of U.S. military command considered that activity serious enough to mobilize nearly 5,000 personnel and a combat fleet. What sits in the space between those 3 points is the part of the story the ice has never given back. Antarctica is the only continent on Earth with no indigenous human population. No country owns it. No nation has ever permanently settled it. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959, signed by 12 nations including the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom, froze all territorial claims on the continent and prohibited military activity there. It was signed 11 years after Operation Highjump, 11 years after the U.S. Navy sent an aircraft carrier to map a continent where, officially, there was nothing worth defending and nobody to defend against. The Schirmacher Oasis today is a research site. Scientists from Russia and India work there in rotating seasonal teams. They measure ice cores. They study microbial life in the lakes. They monitor geothermal activity beneath the surface. None of them have found any evidence of constructed human infrastructure beneath the ice or underground in the surrounding rock. None of them have been asked to look for it either. The ice sheet of Antarctica averages nearly 2 kilometers of depth across the continent. In some areas, it exceeds 3 kilometers. We have mapped its surface from satellite with extraordinary precision. What lies in the rock beneath it, in the geothermally active zones, in the valleys buried under millennia of accumulation, is mapped far less completely than the surface of the Moon. We know more about the geography of Mars than we do about what lies beneath the Antarctic ice in the interior of Queen Maud Land. The question this story ultimately asks is not whether the Nazis built a base. The evidence says they almost certainly did not a permanent one, not in 30 days with seaplanes and swastika darts. The question this story asks is simpler and stranger. Why did the discovery of an anomaly in the most remote location on Earth, liquid lakes, bare ground, geothermal heat in the middle of permanent ice, trigger a classified German naval mission in 1938, apparent U-boat activity in the Southern Ocean in 1945, and a military response from the United States in 1946? And why, for all the documents that have been declassified across 8 decades since, does the answer to that question still require so much inference? The seaplanes that flew over the Schirmacher Oasis in 1939 are gone. The submarines that wandered the South Atlantic in 1945 were scrapped. The men who sailed on Highjump are gone. The Oasis is still there. The geothermal heat is still rising from somewhere below it, and the ice keeps its silence. It always has. Now I want to hear from you. 3 verified facts, 3 events separated by 8 years. Which one do you find hardest to explain away? The Oasis? The submarines that refused to surface? Admiral Byrd's warning about aircraft attacking from the poles in 1947? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Let's talk about it. We set a goal of 50 likes today. If we crossed it, that is your support driving this channel forward. If we have not crossed it yet, this is your moment right now. Next time, we go even deeper. A different war, a different ocean, and a classified document that one government fought for 60 years to keep completely sealed. The moment it was finally released, it changed what we thought we knew about the entire story. Subscribe so you do not miss it. I will see you in the dark.